Ecclesia, this is Pastor Chris, and I could not be more excited to get to share with you some really amazing videos you may know around our community. There are these rhythms that we think are really important. In the beginning of the church, I realized nobody cared what we believed. As we talked to people in Montrose when we were getting started, nobody ever came up and said, like, do you believe in the virgin birth, or do you believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus? What people wanted to know is, like, what are you going to do? My friend Bob Goff says it well, right? Love does. And so these rhythms have been really important to us from the beginning. And we think we got to meditate on them and come back to them and make them an integrated part of our life. And that when we do that, we're going to be our best selves. So we had some really amazing Ecclesians, and I just go, wow, the chemistry in this circle of people is really, really amazing. And they're just talking about what I would talk about with you if we went and had dinner and just said, like, after 25 years, how do we keep ourselves on the right track? And I'd go, hey, we keep ourselves on the right track. We don't drift in our mission by observing these rhythms. So I'm really hopeful that as you watch these, they're going to be edifying. They're going to give you some new thoughts. They're going to stimulate some things, and they're going to help you and help me recommit to the things that I think make life great. I love you. And I want the life that we have together, the spiritual life we have, not to be a burden, but to be a joy. The rhythms help in that, and I hope that these discussions will lead you on that path. God bless you. I love you. Enjoy.
Hey, Ecclesia family. If we haven't met in person, my name's Wayne. I get to be one of the pastors here. And I'm so excited because if you're here and you're watching this, it means that you are embarking on a journey to discover more about something we call the rhythms of Ecclesia. So we have been working hard behind the scenes to put together some resources for you to be able to utilize, and not just on your own, but in community, that you can do this with other people. But here's a little bit of what we've done. So what you're about to watch are some conversations that we filmed where we took time with each one of our rhythms. So that's seek God, seek beauty, be real, be kind, be hospitable, serve others. We took each one of those rhythms and we sat down with a group of people and we talked about, what does this actually look like? What does this mean? And then part of what we wanted to hear, especially from these people, is what does this look like in your life? How does this actually flesh out in your day to day? And so you're going to get to hear from myself and a conversation with Pastor Sean, and then his wife Rochelle and their daughter Malia. And then you're also going to get to hear from Riley Villarreal, who's on our team and is doing amazing work, helping out with community life and a few other things. And the hope is that in hearing this conversation, that it sparks more conversation for you in people that you are walking with. And that it also gives you ideas to figure out, okay, but how can you actually begin to flesh these out? And so we're going to start with the first one. And the reason we're starting with Seek God is we feel like this is really foundational for who we are as a community. It really defines that we're not just a humanitarian or like a service project or trying to do those things. We want to do those things. We want to make a difference in the world. But it comes out of a deep desire to know and follow Jesus. You're going to get to be dropped into a conversation where we start to talk about that. And then when that wraps up, we're excited that you're going to have a chance to hopefully discuss this and talk about it with others as well. So again, we love you and we're so grateful that you're here and excited to see what comes out as we dive into the rhythms of Ecclesia. So when we talk about seek God, we say that what we mean is to read the scriptures and meditate on them daily. I think it's actually a little bit more broad than that too, that there's like some intentionality and some pursuit of God in a whole host of different spiritual disciplines and practices. But I'm curious, I'll just throw this question out there. When you hear us talk about a rhythm of seeking God, what does that mean for you? What does that look like?
Well, I would agree with you that, like, by the definition, like, that seems very narrow. But at the same time, I really like the definition in that it's grounding, right? And so just about everyone I know from all sorts of walks of life would say that on some level they're seeking God. And sometimes that becomes incredibly individualistic and like, I'm just like seeking God wherever God is. And it's very amorphous and ethereal. But saying like, okay, we're talking about the God that it was revealed in the scriptures. And we know, right, that there is more to God than what can be captured in the Bible. But at the same time, that God that we discover that is more than the Bible is not contradicted by the scriptures. And so one of the easier ways to access what God is doing in the world is by coming to terms with who this God is revealed to be, how this God has journeyed with other people through history, how this God has revealed himself. And we have to continually remind both ourselves, our community, our church, I know this is really about what God's kingdom looks like. This is how God's kingdom unfolds. So I think when you start talking about seeking God, that's what I would love for us to center on, that what we do is not because we think we're making the world better just to be a better place because we want it to be, or it's our vision of what a better place would be. Like, this is God's kingdom. This is how God would have things done on earth as it is in heaven.
I think something else that would be helpful to hear too is, how has being a part of Ecclesia helped you in this arena of what it looks like to seek God?
So specific to my experience at Ecclesia is because we're such an eclectic mix of people from all these different Christian traditions, one of the kind of beauties of being here has been to kind of learn about and understand how different traditions have approached connection with God, and to realize that, I come from a very Bible-based system where the primary way to connect with God is to study scripture and to have a knowledge of scripture. And then to come here and meet people who were raised in other traditions, who their experience is the place where God reveals himself is nature. And so you need to be experiencing the natural world to understand creativity, to understand God's design, to understand how systems work together. There are then other people who really focus on contemplative practices. And that's something I've definitely picked up from connections at Ecclesia, is just spending time in quiet, walking a labyrinth, which is not something I ever would have done, as an adolescent. I that just didn't have a place. And so understanding kind of all these different approaches to connecting with God has been something that's enriched my spirituality and my understanding of who God is and my just experience of God and with God. And so I think that's a real gift that Ecclesia we give to each other, really. And I really appreciate a lot about that.
I resonate with that a lot too, coming from a really Bible-centric, Bible-based. And in that branch, it was very much, if it's not in the Bible, then it's not okay, and we're not going to do it. Which, things like walking in a labyrinth, not in the Bible, and it shouldn't be, but there's it coming here and having so much of those experiences open that up to, hey, just because this isn't outlined in the Bible that you should do that doesn't mean that there aren't faithful brothers and sisters and followers of Jesus who have been utilizing these practices or things for thousands of years to help them find God in the scriptures and in their daily life and all that kind of thing. It just opens so much up. Yeah.
And I think too, what has surprised me about it is how I have found examples, not the labyrinth, but how I have found some of these practices in scripture. I think about Elijah being in the cave.
Yeah.
And how he's there and he's just listening for God. He's not reading something. He's not looking to a text. He's just listening.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out where God's going to speak. And then of course the example of Jesus pulling away from crowds and having times of solitude, times of quiet, times of reflection. I feel like in some ways, a lot of the modeling is actually there in the text. It's just not what my tradition emphasized.
Yeah.
And so I kind of missed it. Yeah. So it's kind of neat how these other practices bring these different parts of the scripture to life.
I think something important to note too about this one is the foundation for the rest. I think I've found it, sometimes I've had inner conflict with the rhythms at times. I'm like, what are we saying here? Are we saying to follow, do I just look to be kind and try to do that? And I've learned in my short Christian life that doesn't work, that it's a cycle to try harder and then whatever it is to try to do a spiritual thing or be good or whatever. So I think this has to be the beginning point for all of it, to see God's grace and God's strength and power be what animates us in our lives, not like us doing it and seeking God when it's convenient. Like, I think that's really, it can be tempting because we live in a really busy world. So yeah, I've even like wrestled within that in myself. I think that's like the common human experience with faith, but in particular here, like with the rhythms, it's like, it has to be said that that's where we start.
So something that may be helpful for us too is even just to hear, what does it actually look like in your life day to day? What are some of the practical things you do to actually seek God?
Yeah, so typically my kind of most regular prayer life looks like the practice of the daily office, and in kind of the Western English speaking tradition over the past few hundred years, that's looks like prayers in morning, evening, and typically night. This kind of cycle of prayer is built around kind of the 30-day reading of the Psalms. So you're going through the all 150 Psalms, which is really only like 10 a day, kind of over and over and over. And then around that, built in are these kind of passages of scripture, usually kind of 1 to 3 chapters a day. And the daily recitation of like the Lord's Prayer and the Apostles' Creed, as well as other prayers, kind of depending on which version you're doing. There are a lot of proliferating versions. But these kind of repeated prayers, things like saying the Lord's Prayer, the Creed on a daily basis, are really rooting in who this God that we're seeking is and why we're seeking that God. So give us today our daily bread. He will come again to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. Yeah. Right? Kind of this daily rhythm of reminding ourselves who we are and what we're doing, kind of in the pursuit of God and the pursuit of holiness.
Something like just hearing you talk about that, I've so appreciated the Voice Bible and the translation there, and so much of how it came together, and the idea of let's pair great scholars with great artists, that then you get something that is beautiful, easy to read, but also true to what was happening in the original context, why they wrote this down. But a little known thing about the Voice Bible is there's a reading plan in the back of it as well. And what I found helpful is it's a 3-year reading plan. So it, for me in the season I'm in, where I've got young kids and like trying to find some of those windows, I can't tell you how many times I sit down and open the Bible and I'm like one verse in and I hear the baby cry again. You know, it's like, okay, well, we didn't get very far that day. But to have it breaks it down to where it's like, hey, this is actually digestible, so that if I miss a day or I miss a portion of a day, I'm not so far behind that I can't keep with it. That sometimes it's helpful to do that. So even for me, it's been a good reminder that I don't have to read 10 chapters a day. It can be like a small piece, but that orienting to, I'm doing this intentionally to hear God's voice and God's presence in my life is really, really helpful. So it's great to hear what you practically do. It's insightful.
For me, it's like really taken a bunch of different shapes over time. And I've gotten to learn a little bit more about like the liturgical and what it might look like to pray regularly or read regularly, or like some seasons reading a bunch or some seasons not reading a lot. And I've had to, I've seen it for like about 2 or 3 years as like a workshopping, especially at this point in my life. I'm like, still like, I'll try something for like 3 weeks and either like keep it in the slot of the like rhythm, the daily rhythm, or I'll like slot it out for something else. And trying to stick with like, what are the basics of what needs to happen in this like moment of morning prayer, whatever time it is. And there's been some seasons of life where it's been like, I don't even have the energy or strength to pray because I'm like grieving or going through something really tough. So those seasons have been more like Psalms and that's it. Like I just read it and I'm like, oh, or maybe I cry or something. There's been other times when I find that I do audio really well. audio contemplative prayer or like guided prayer, scripture that's audio. So I'll sit, especially in seasons where I'm like really distracted, like that centers me a lot to go back to every day. I use Lectio 365, which is an app that's really helpful as a daily, a morning prayer and an evening prayer that I like to use a lot. And that will kind of take you through an examine. Examine's been something that I've really loved to do, to kind of like reflect about the day and see, just to have the eyes to see like, where was God today? Where was I not far from God, but where was I the most detached? And like, how can I ask for forgiveness in that moment? Or is there a moment of confession that needs to happen? And just like trying to keep to the disciplines, because there's been a lot of like, I don't know, back and forth with like, I don't feel like doing this right now. So I'll go through like periods of time where I'm like, I don't want to be super rigid and disciplined because I think that's going to create more shame. But then I'm like, if I don't have disciplines, then I'm not actually doing the thing that I most long to do. Like, so I think pushing more towards the steady rhythms, like kind of what you were saying, I'm not anywhere near like that rhythmic with it. But I've learned that it brings so much freedom to actually put in place the things that you want to do, like with God, like the ways you want to seek God or the ways that God asks us to seek him, and to commit to it and allow grace to flow through it and to allow God to come from the outside and do something outside of us. So yeah, definitely trudging along with like workshopping something that sticks. And I say workshop because I don't want to create the shame cycle.
Yeah.
You know, like I can workshop and stay committed to this every day and it's still, you know, keep moving along and not be something that gets like a burden, becomes a burden. So,
Well, thanks. I found this to be a really helpful, robust conversation. And like we've said, seeking God is so fundamental. And I think you said like, this is a lot about, this is very driving for us, like who we are as a community. So I'm hopeful that this offers others in the community a chance and a window to see how they can seek God, both on their own as well as in the community. So yeah, looking forward to more conversations around the rhythms with all of you. As we got the chance to hear some of that conversation, I hope it inspires you. I hope you walk away with some really practical things that helps you do some things like begin to read the scriptures on a daily basis. And hopefully it gives you the sense of accessibility and freedom to know that, hey, you don't have to read large chunks. You can just start where you are. I hope you actually maybe look up a few apps like Riley mentioned, Lectio 365, that maybe help you spend some time in intentional prayer. And I hope, again, that you get to do this with other people. And so we're excited that you're here and that you get to do that, and excited to see what comes from the conversations as you begin to flesh this out with other people. So Ecclesia, we love you, and we hope and pray that this conversation, this resource is a gift to you and helps you as you journey and actually do seek God.